Shri Nrsimhadeva ki Go Premanande. Rakta, ask them to keep the kids quiet. Adya Prabhu, wonderful to see you. Well, today is Nrsimha Chaturdasi. It's the 14th day of the 15-day lunar cycle. And it's the appearance day of Nrsimha. Nara means man, and Simha means lion. Nrsimha. Also, Nrsimha. Nri also means man, and Simha means lion. So it is the appearance day of Nrsimha. This is, one of the more exotic holy days in our calendar that we observe. Nrsimha is a half man, half lion incarnation of the Lord. And when we say half man, half lion, we mean the face of a lion and the body of a man. So from his neck up, he looks like a lion. And from his neck down, from his chest down, arms, legs, waist, looks like a man. Sometimes you see the deity differently, in different Sometimes iconographers will paint or sculpt the deity differently. But if you want to look at the description given in the Bhagavatam, neck down is a human, and neck up is a lion. Now, you could question the logic. Why would Krishna appear in a half man, half lion form? I think that's a worthwhile question. We'll skip over that for some time, and we'll get back to it a little later on. The traditional thing you do on Nrsimha Chaturdasi is you recite and listen to, so you're either reciting it or you're listening to it, the entire story from beginning to end. And the story takes up an entire canto of the Bhagavatam, entire skanda of the Bhagavatam, the 7th book of the Bhagavatam. 9 chapters are dedicated to this Leela. The book's 10, 11 chapters. 9 of them are dedicated to this Leela. It's 14. My bad. Oh, Hare Krishna. Yeah, of course. Thank you, Prabhu. Ah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Receiving a garland from the deity is it's an auspicious thing. It's a good thing. You receive it, you wear it, and you smell it. Sometimes in Badrinath, you can't wear it for very long. In Badrinath, there's this little insect. You going? All right. Thank you for bringing your deity. We feel blessed to see you, and we also feel blessed to see the deity. Nrsimhadeva Bhagavan ki. Jai. Thank you, Prabhu. You go to Badrinath. It's a big holy place in the Himalayas. They don't have tulsi there. It's too high in the mountains, so they grow oregano, and they call it mountain tulsi, and they offer it to the deity, and they make garlands out of it. But there's this particular worm-like insect that oftentimes is on the deity and is on the garland. And so if you wear the garland, you get bit by these unusual insects. So usually you have to take the garland, you smell it, you touch it to your head a few times, and then within just a couple minutes. What's our time? Oh. I mean, the clock turned when I looked at the phone. Who's fasting from food and water? You can go get some water. Go drink some water. Who's fasting from food and water? Raise your hand. You guys are all? You're going to get them some, you're going to put some what? You just let them drink water? You're going to give them some lemonade? Or some juice or something? We'll have some cups of juice up there in the next 2 minutes. And then you can just get up during the class and go and get yourself some juice. We fast from food and water today. Till dusk, till when the day meets the night. Normally you break fast with nimbu pani. You take lemon water with some sugar and like lemonade. Maybe sometimes you put a little black pepper in it too. Helps to stimulate your digestion. Some juice will be there in just a minute. Just wait. Some juice will come. Sit, wait. You don't have to sit there. You sit on the chair. Just wait. Don't get weird. Be cool, dude. It's okay. So Nrsimha wore a garland too. He wore a garland of intestines. You'll sometimes see that in our iconography. A garland of intestines around his neck. That's Hiranyakashipu's intestines. And Nrsimha decorated himself with them, like a garland. So he garlanded himself. Anyway, we should tell the whole story, and then we'll make some points throughout. At the end, we'll see what you learned. Leela is beneficial because it teaches you things. It teaches you lessons. And so you hear the narration, and then lessons go into your heart through the story in a way they wouldn't if it was just straight philosophy. So the Leela is chock full of all sorts of wonderful lessons. So here we go. One day, Maharaj Yudhisthira, Arjun's older brother, was speaking with the great sage Narad, and he said, why is it that it seems like Krishna favors the suras, the demigods, and doesn't favor the demons? I have this doubt. When I watch Krishna's pastimes, and I hear Krishna's pastimes, it seems like he's always favoring one person over another. And so it's bewildered my mind, and I'm disturbed. Where is that noise coming from? Hey, pujaris, Keep it down. All right. I'm fasting, so like my mind isn't working so good. I'm going to have to move slow. Usually you don't find straight up doubts of atheism in the Vedic literatures. If you look far and wide, the Vedas do contend with straight atheism. Charvak and other philosophers were just hedonistic atheists. And so you do get arguments against straight atheism. But oftentimes it's a little bit more nuanced than that. There's doubts not about the fundamental existence of God, but why would God cause suffering? Why does God favor one person over another? It's a little bit more of an intermediate level of doubt. Do you follow this? You also find those arguments postulated with an atheistic philosophy, but and they're usually used to determine there must not be a God. Hey, you, stop talking. Thank you. You're old enough where you can listen. Thank you. Usually, in the Vedic literatures, you find that there's a basic theism, a basic belief in divinity. And so the question that's postulated, that's put forward, is why is it that we see God apparently favoring certain people and punishing others? I think it's a reasonable question. I think it's a question that requires to be answered. And so that's the beginning of this entire volume. And it leads to the story of Nrsimha, which is really the story of Prahlad. Nrsimha does make an appearance in the story, but honestly the story is more about Prahlad than it is about Nrsimha. So the answer is given that actually Krishna doesn't favor anybody. You come into this world and Krishna facilitates you and accompanies you in this world and fulfills your desires. And if you behave impiously, then you get the natural results of your impious action. And Krishna's there as a facilitator, making the whole show go on so that you meet up with the right people to get your just desserts, whether they be good or bad. But Krishna's not actually wishing ill on anybody. And even when you get punished, and even when you suffer, it's ultimately for your betterment. It's because of something that you did, something that you wanted. In this sense, Krishna is a really powerful and intelligent facilitator, but not a manipulator. We come into this world, we make our moves, and Krishna facilitates and allows that to happen and allows us to execute our free will. And whatever happens to us, although it might be ordained by or facilitated by or managed by Krishna, ultimately the genesis of whatever happens to us is ourselves. And therefore we find pious people, good things happen to them, and impious people, bad things happen. Sometimes you have to peel back a couple of layers, because you might be pious for 5 minutes. You got to go back a few decades or lifetimes to find what exactly is going on. I think that if we got the full desserts of everything we did in this lifetime, and we could not deny that everything we did came back to haunt us, I don't think it would be possible to be atheistic. I also don't think it would be possible to be impious. It would be too much in your face. And so actually Krishna has to stretch it out over a few lifetimes just so that we can ignorantly do what we want to do and not be forced by somebody with an executioner's axe standing right in front of us, and if we make a wrong move, we get the hatchet. So I even see time and forgetfulness and karma over many lifetimes as being a necessary feature of the universe in order for us to truly have free will. So anyway, this doubt comes up. Even within theism, there are still some doubts. And then it comes up that even in the case of demons, Krishna's actually blessing them. Even Shishupal, who was this incredibly derogatory, critical person who just lived to criticize Krishna, when Krishna finally killed him at the Raja Sabha, at the big assembly, then Shishupal was given liberation. And Yudhishthira couldn't, Yudhishthira witnessed it, so he couldn't deny it. But then he heard the backstory. He heard the backstory of Shishupal. That Shishupal had originally been an associate of Vishnu's from the spiritual world, who'd been cursed and fell down. He couldn't believe that. How could anybody be cursed in the from the spiritual world to fall down? And then this led to the story of Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, who were the first births of these banished guards in Vaikuntha who had offended sages and not permitted them to enter. I don't want to get into it. We could spend the whole class on that. I probably shouldn't have even brought it up. We're just going to skip over it. It's not like it's difficult to explain, but it would just, we got to explain what Vaikuntha is and who the four Kumaras are and who Jai and Vijay are and what the specific context of the curse is and what was really going on there. It's not like it's super advanced stuff, but it just would take a good 20 minutes or half an hour to work through it. So we're just going to pretend I didn't say any of that stuff. It's a tangent I don't want to go down. I don't think it's necessary. It shows up in the they have 10 chapters to deal with it. I don't have 10 chapters. And so I'm going to have to streamline things a little bit for you. Anyway, when Jai and Vijay were cursed, their first birth in the material world was there as Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. Hiranyaksha was killed by Varahadev, and it made his brother Hiranyakashipu especially angry. Especially angry. Now, Hiranyaksha was born before Hiranyakashipu. They were twins, sons of Diti, and therefore they're known as Daityas. The sons of Aditi, Kashyap's other wife, are called Adityas. And that's the demigods and the demons. They come from the same family. The Daityas and the Adityas are from the same father, different mothers, Diti and Aditi. And so Hiranyaksha was born first, which makes him the older or younger brother. They're twins. Huh? How does it make him younger? Huh? He's older, right? What do you mean? He's born first. The Jyotish will look at the clock and he's born first. How can you call him younger?
Twins, the first one comes out is younger.
Why? You don't know. The idea is there in Indian culture that if you're born first, you're younger because the other baby was in the womb first. And so you came out first, but the one who's still in the womb was behind you, therefore he's first, and you're the younger brother. And so in the case of twins, in India, the one who's born first, who's technically older according to the clock, is considered to be the younger brother. Just a weird little cultural phenomenon. And you learn this, but it doesn't make sense to you. It's called a plausibility structure. It's something you hear and you never question it. And so, Hiranyakashipu was the older brother of Hiranyaksha, and he was really angry that his younger brother got killed. And he hated Vishnu for it. Now, this whole question that was asked, why does Vishnu appear to favor some people and not favor others? Hiranyakashipu is an example of somebody who had that doubt because his brother got killed and he just couldn't wrap his head around it. His brother was like the most impious person like in creation. But he was just blinded, and if something bad happened to his younger brother, he just wanted to blame somebody. So Hiranyakashipu is an exact example of somebody who has that doubt about why does God play favorites, and it really ran amok in his mind and ruined his entire life. He couldn't reason through it. This happens to people. Like if you suffer from depression, you get angry at Krishna. Why did you make me depressed? You ignore the fact that you've done all sorts of things to warrant being depressed. You ignore the idea of karma. You take no responsibility, and you blame Krishna for your depression. Or if you lose your wealth due to some shady business dealing or some high-risk investment, you become angry at Krishna instead of blaming yourself for your foolish investment strategy. You follow? You may even trip while running and be like upset at Krishna. Why did you make me trip? Isn't it? If you haven't thought this way, you're a liar. You just have to be very foolish and never think more than an animal. But if you think more than an animal and you believe in God, you've blamed Krishna for all sorts of things which are just so obviously your fault. It's not like you have to go back multiple lifetimes. You drove over a nail, therefore you've got a flat tire. You were running and not looking where you're going, and therefore you tripped. You hung out with a bunch of people who had COVID, didn't wear your mask, and you got COVID. You follow? You ate a bunch of animals, and therefore you got zoonotic diseases. So Hiranyakashipu hated Vishnu. And he thought, I want to cut Vishnu's head off. I want to cut Narayan's head off. And watch him bleed to death. And my younger brother loved to suck blood like a vampire. And so I'll please him by cutting Vishnu's head off and sucking his blood. Another fault is that he had this real anthropomorphic conception of divinity, where he thought that Vishnu was a powerful entity and that God was sort of like him and that he might be able to beat God. And he was really, he really saw himself as an apex predator and a master of the universe, a lord of the universe. And he saw God not as being a sovereign or the ultimate master, but more as competition. It's a little bit ridiculous. Could you go close that door for me? Nick or Ross, thank you guys. Thank you. She had to take a call, but she didn't realize if you stand right outside the door with the door open, then we can hear you. I don't think that people... Now, of course, she wants to come back. I don't think it's quite so overt. People don't think God is my competition. It's more functional than fully thought through. You look around the world and you see beautiful people, and you think that somehow or other they're there for you to look at and enjoy. And you see flowers and you think they're there for you to smell. And there's this assumption as you're moving your way through the world that everything on this planet is up for grabs. And it's somehow meant for you. Or at least it potentially could be. I don't think that that's a very logical way to look at the world. Land existed before you showed up here. It will be here after you're gone. In what sense do you own the land? Your body was gifted to you. How does it become your body? What did you do to earn this body? It just got thrown at you, got gifted to you. It also, you can't really stop it from being repossessed. There are forces such as time and entropy that repossess your body. And so somehow we're born in this world almost like a person who walks down the street and sees a bunch of empty cars and thinks you could just get in one of them and drive. You follow? But if you have a little bit of an education, when you look and you see all the empty cars, you know that they belong to somebody. You don't think that just because the car's there and the owner's not in it right there at that exact moment, that it means it's up for grabs. But somehow with the rest of this world, we don't think about it too deeply. We look at people and places and things, we try to put our names on them, we try to own them, we try to possess them, and we don't bother thinking, well, wait a second, all this stuff was here before I got here. I got a bunch of stuff gifted to me. Am I a steward or am I an owner? Am I borrowing this thing? Is it on loan to me? Who does it ultimately belong to? Most of the world, 5 billion people, have a philosophy of what's called familism. They don't believe that their prime objective in life is to enjoy individually. They believe that as human beings, their primary purpose in life is to serve their family. And therefore they make business endeavors for their children, not for themselves. They make business endeavors for their parents. It's very common in India. You live in a joint household. You give your paycheck to your mother, your father. It's very common. Sometimes it gets abusive. The mom's just collecting paychecks from everybody and letting you keep almost next to nothing. But there's this idea that you are a member of a family and your purpose of existence is to benefit the greater good of your tribe or your people and not just for your own enjoyment. Most of the world actually views reality that way. And so it's not that these ideas aren't, a life of service, an altruistic life, a philanthropic life, a life of public service, a life for other people. It's not that these ideas don't exist anywhere in the world. But you could expand on that and you could extrapolate and you think actually the whole world doesn't belong to me. So if you think the world is up for grabs and you can grab it, then you're competing for it. And who are you ultimately competing with? The owner, because you're trying to usurp what doesn't belong to you. And who's the owner of everything? God. And therefore, although it might not quite be as bad as Hiranyakashipu thinking, I'm going to kill Krishna, I'm going to kill Vishnu, I'm going to kill Narayan. Functionally, it more or less is the same thing. You want to own things. You don't want to get your karma. You want to get away with stuff. You want to put your name on things. You want to pretend they belong to you. And you really don't like it when people tell you otherwise. So although it might not be quite as over the top and in your face as what Hiranyakashipu was saying, it's not too far off. You with me? Now Hiranyakashipu was super learned. He preached to his family members, you're not the body, be aloof. It almost sounds like the second chapter of the Gita in this canto. He was learned in the Vedas. He was a member of Varnashram. He was a Kshatriya. He had Brahmanas who he worked with, such as Shukra Acharya, Sandana Marka. He had Brahmanas he worked with. He himself was a Kshatriya. He followed rules and regulations. But despite external displays of religiosity, in his heart, what he really wanted to do was he wanted to subvert the law of karma and make it so that you could enjoy and win by being impious. That was what he expressed his ultimate desire was. To reverse the structure and the law of the universe. And make it so that by being impious, you would be happy. And by being pious, you would be miserable. He wanted to punish Vishnu. He hated Vishnu because he had a rough childhood and he lost his brother prematurely. and just couldn't wrap his head around that. Spent his whole life living in that one traumatic moment and never being able to move beyond it. But he was learned. And he performed tapasya. He performed tapasya. He stood for 100 years with his hands up in the air. You see this in India sometimes. Sometimes you meet a guy in India, he's got his arm up in the air like this. For like 20 years. Like some kind of yogi just walks around. You ever seen this? Kumbh Mela? I've seen. You've seen? Just arm up in the air like this. Frozen, atrophied, just up in the air. Never puts his hand down. I mean, you see crazy stuff in India. You go to Kumbh Mela, you'll see sadhus hanging from the tree by their genital. All sorts of, I mean, it's like a circus sideshow. You see like all sorts of crazy stuff. You'll meet sadhus who never sit down. They have a stick, they lean on the stick, sleep standing up. All sorts of crazy stuff. People have been following the Ekadasi for 50 years. Never cut their hair. A massive jata.
They have a philosophy, like, because of tapasya your powers increase.
Do you think that I'm not qualified to speak? You think you're the pundit?
No.
But yet you have to interrupt me.
You just called them crazy, so I thought.
I didn't say crazy. I said you see crazy things. I didn't say they're crazy. You may be a little crazy. So he performed tapasya. Generally speaking, we think of tapasya as being something done by religious people. But the purpose behind your tapasya speaks volumes about your character. So he had brahmanas, he was a kshatriya, he was learned in jnana, he preached to his family members, he performed tapasyas, and he was practically speaking the worst person on the planet. He was a big yogi. And for 100 years he performed tapasya. And he had a desire. His desire was to become immortal. He prayed to Brahma. He hated Narayan, so he did not pray to God. But he found the most powerful person in the universe and he prayed to him. And so Brahma came. There was a whole thing. The demigods became very disturbed. His austerities created a massive heat in the world. And he sent his associates out into the world to disturb fire sacrifices and disturb religious performances and create trouble all over the world. But eventually everybody took notice of these massive austerities, and Brahma showed up and said, "You've been performing austerities. What do you want?" At that point, Hiranyakashipu was just skin and bones, and Brahma sprinkled some water from his kamandalu, and Hiranyakashipu came back to life. His prana was circulating in his bones. His body had withered away, but his will made him live even just in his bones. And he came back to life. He was the color of molten gold. His body was powerful, could withstand the force of a thunderbolt. When he came back to life by Brahma's grace, and he said, "I want to be immortal." And Brahma said, "I'm not immortal. I can't make you immortal." He said, "Then you make it so that I can never be killed in the day or the night. I can never be killed on land or in the air. I can never be killed inside or outside. I can never be killed by anything living or dead. I can never be killed by an animal or a human. I can never be killed by any weapons." He had a whole long laundry list, like a contract. And his idea was, I'm going to specify everything I want in the contract, and I'm going to win. And Brahma said, "Yeah, so be it." No problem. And so then Hiranyakashipu now kicked Indra out of his palace and moved into Indra's palace. And all the demigods had to worship him. And he became like a god in this world, completely intoxicated by his power. But he performed so many austerities that even though he was acting a fool, he didn't fall immediately. It took some time for the results of his austerities to diminish. The demigods, of course, were totally disturbed. Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva didn't have to worship him, but all the other demigods did. And then he had a son. Now his son's name was Prahlad, which means greatly joyous. Hlad means joyous. Prahlad, especially joyous. And so he had a son named Prahlad. And one day, Prahlad came to see his father, and he'd been going to the demon Gurukul, the like boarding school to train you in how to be a very bad person. So they were training him how to cheat and lie. They were training him like this. And so Prahlad, he came and sat on his father's lap, and his father said, "What's the best thing your teachers have taught you?" And he said, "Hodim Ashayeta," that you should take shelter of Krishna. Hodi is a name for Krishna. Hodim Ashayeta. One should take ashray, shelter of Hodi. And his father was totally disturbed. And he laughed and he said, "Oh, just see, the Vaishnavas have come into the Gurukul and they're corrupting our youth." And he told Sandanamarka, the headmaster, he said, "You go and take him and train him, but don't let the Vaishnavas come in and teach him any more of this nonsense. That you should live your life surrendering to God." You follow? So they took him and they doubled up. They trained him even more. And after some time, they thought that they'd prepared him and he wouldn't embarrass them anymore. And they brought him back again. And he said, "Okay, what's the best thing you've learned?" And then Prahlad said, "I learned Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam Padasevanam." I learned that the purpose of life is to listen to, and think about, and meditate on, and chant the name of Vishnu. Serve him. At this point, Hiranyakashipu became furious. And he thought, "You go kill him. He's going to ruin everything. If your limb is poisonous, then you have to cut it off to save the rest of your body. Kill my son." Such a horrible person he was. He didn't do it himself. He ordered the crime to be committed. It's called racketeering. It's a federal crime. When you order someone to commit crimes on your behalf, it's much more serious. They came up with this in the 30s because organized crime families, you would never touch a gun, but you would tell somebody else to pick up a gun. And then you'd say, "I didn't do anything myself, so I'm not guilty." You're texting so much. And you're right there in front of me. It's not like you're off to the side. You're right in front of me and you're just madly texting. It cannot possibly be necessary. Too much texting. Maybe you think you're like wearing a cloak of invisibility, but it's not true. I can see. Some necessary text is okay. Like I saw you texted for a moment, but then you put your phone down. I can tolerate it, but if it's too much, it like draws my mind, it draws my eyes. I can't help but see it. No, I didn't even notice you. You're off to the side. You play the game right. You're hiding your phone. You're off to the side.
I'm on call from work.
You're slick. If you're on call for work, do it.
I shut it off.
If you're on call for work, then I won't. You came all the way here, you can be here. But if you're texting your friend, don't do that. On for work, I won't complain. I'm happy that you're here. So then he said, kill him. And then they tried to kill Prahlad. They threw him off a mountain. He didn't die. They tried to stick him with a trident. They couldn't kill him. It was a miracle. Prahlad was protected by Krishna. He had Krishna Graha. In astrology, the planets are influencing. They call it a Graha, a planet, and it influences you. Graha means to grab or to seize. And so Prahlad was under the influence of Krishna Graha, the planetary influence of Krishna. So no malefic planets or spells could affect him. A lot of times people are into astrology, or they get into all this stuff, some kind of divination. But this is just for people who have no faith in God. Because if you have faith in God, then if you're good with that, then you're good with everything, and whatever happens is okay. If you're friends with the president, you're not afraid of the Secret Service. You follow? If you're friends with the police chief, then you're not afraid of the police officers. And so if you're good with Vishnu, if you're good with Krishna, you should not be worried about trying to do a Hiranyakashipu and organize the world exactly like this. You should be comfortable, going with the flow. Anyway, they cast spells on him. They tried to stick him with a trident. They threw him on the feet of an elephant. They threw him in the ocean. They tried everything under the sun. They couldn't kill him. Then Hiranyakashipu got scared. He thought, I'm the most powerful person in the universe, but I can't kill this person. They must be more powerful than me. I'm scared. So he said, okay, take him to the Gurukul and just keep him quiet, keep him away, lock him up so he can't make any trouble. So he took him back in the forest, and then they tried to, educate him. Prahlad mainly just was quiet. And then they had to leave to go somewhere. And then Prahlad preached to all of the other kids in the school. He preached to all the other kids in the school. And he said to them, it's really interesting if you read it, because remember how I said earlier in the class that you don't generally find straight arguments for theism? And that usually it's more intermediate arguments trying to have a nuanced understanding of God and the nature of God, but not actually doubting whether or not God exists. When Prahlad is speaking to his friends, he goes through a classic theistic argument. He says, first of all, he says, look, people spend their whole lives living like animals, trying to enjoy their senses, and it's all for naught. It's all going to be taken away from you. You should be aloof. But then he says, what you have to do is you have to look at this world. Look at your body, look at your mind in wakefulness, in dreaming, and in deep sleep. Look at your body composed of earth, water, fire, air, ether. Look at your mind composed of mind, intelligence, and false ego. Carefully study the nature of this world. Look at everything, and you'll find that consciousness is above all of it, and you are conscious. Investigate the world until you realize that consciousness is a non-material phenomenon, that consciousness is animating everything, that consciousness is an irreducible facet of reality. And dedicate your life to exploring that. Not living like an animal, trying to eat, sleep, mate, and defend. And don't try to become a brahmana. And don't try to become rich. Just try to love Krishna. And by loving Krishna, automatically you'll become detached from everything in the material world, and you'll find yourself filled with ecstasy and happiness beyond what the material world could ever provide. Don't even try just to become detached. Just attach yourself to Krishna and you'll become detached from everything else. And the only way you'll become a devotee is you have to take shelter of others who are already devotees, and you have to smear your body with the dust from their feet and bathe in it, which is a fancy poetic way of saying you should serve the great souls. And you should learn from them and be mentored by them. And then the kid said, well, you didn't do that. You were born like this. And he said, no, no, no. My mother's name was Kayadu. And when my father, Hiranyakashipu, went to perform austerities, my mother was left alone, and the demigods took over, and they were going to kill my mother. And Narad saved my mother and said, you cannot kill a defenseless woman. And brought her to his ashram, and she lived in his ashram, and she was pregnant with me. And Narad would teach the Bhagavatam, and I heard the Bhagavatam from Narad while I was in the womb of my mother, and that's why I came out of the womb as a great devotee, because I heard from a Vaishnava. And therefore what I said, that you have to connect with other devotees, is true, because I myself am an example of it. And the kids were like, wow. And they had a big kirtan, everybody became a devotee. Then they came back, and they were like, oh my God, Prahlad has just converted our entire school of politicians into great sadhus. And so then they brought him back to Hiranyakashipu, who finally got so angry he said, I'm going to kill you myself. And he was so bitter and resentful and angry. He said, how do you defy me? The whole world shivers when I move my eyebrows. How do you defy me? What's your strength? And Prahlad said, my strength is the same as your strength, Father. The difference is I can control my senses and you can't. You think you're very strong, but you're very weak because you're a victim of your senses and your mind and your desires and your attachments. And that just made Hiranyakashipu say, it's like a snake. He was so angry. He threw Prahlad down, and he said, where's your God now? And Prahlad said, he's everywhere. You can't see him. Prahlad was fearless because he saw Vishnu. And he saw him everywhere. And Hiranyakashipu threw him down, stood up, unsheathed his sword, and said, you think your God's everywhere, but he's not going to save you now. And you think your God's in this pillar, but he's nowhere to be found. He struck the pillar. So Prahlad was a devotee of Krishna. And he had an amazing life. And his life is fantastic and miraculous, but it's not totally distinct from our lives. Like those Gurukul kids, we have to think about the nature of consciousness, and we have to go through a natural theistic process to realize God exists. Once we realize God exists, we still wonder about the nature of God and why does God make some people suffer. And sometimes our attachments are such that we can't see that we're the architects of our own suffering. And we want to blame somebody else. And sometimes we even blame Krishna or we blame other people. And sometimes even though the truth is right in front of us, we refuse to see it because we're just too attached. And we want some kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, and we won't broaden our minds. And we might even be learned and perform some austerity and have some religiosity, but there might be some core darkness and materialism in our heart which stops us from really taking shelter and from really growing. And then we have to meet Vaishnavas and hear from them and hear the gospel, the good news, and it turns something in our hearts, and we can begin on the path of auspiciousness. And then we meet with many disturbing things on that path. And we have to have heart, and we have to we actually have to learn to recognize something by its symptoms, instead of just, you want to go beyond the world, you want to get into the adhoksaja realm, the realm beyond the senses, you want to see Krishna. You have to learn to see through hearing. You have to learn to see through logic. You have to learn to access your spiritual faculties ultimately. We don't have to be blind. You can use logic. You can use reason. And those things can take you beyond logic and reason to the transcendental plane. And we have to go through that process. And it's difficult. And we meet with adversity. And sometimes we're our own worst enemy. And sometimes we have to be like Prahlad, and sometimes we have to stop being like Hiranyakashipu. And although these are archetypal figures, in a microcosmic way, they're manifest in all of our lives. Like that famous Native American saying that there's two wolves, a wolf of light and a wolf of darkness fighting. And then the young brave says, well, which one wins? And then the old brave says, the one that you feed. We have to minimize the negativity. stop forgetting Krishna, and then we have to accentuate the positivity and always remember Krishna. And so within this Leela, you really find the basic landscape and skeleton of a spiritual life, of an awakening, of the metamorphosis of spirituality. And then Hiranyakashipu was just so angry at his son, he was going to kill him. He struck that pillar to prove to his son that God doesn't exist. Prahlad had no doubts. And then Vishnu finally had enough, Krishna finally had enough. Prahlad was not a devotee of Nrsimha, he was a devotee of Krishna. But Krishna wanted to protect his child, and so he found an appropriate form. And the pillar cracked, and Nrsimha came out. Now he's not an animal or a man. And he killed him in the threshold of the palace, not inside or outside. And he sat him on his lap, so it wasn't in the land or in the sky. And he killed him with his nails, which aren't living or dead, and not a weapon. You follow? And he killed him at dusk, which isn't day or night. And he fulfilled all of the promises of Brahma and still killed Hiranyakashipu. The battle was quite epic. Nrsimha came out. His mouth was agape and it looked like a cave. His eyes were like molten gold. He had a white lion's mane. His neck was thick, his chest was broad, his waist was small. He had unlimited arms holding unlimited weapons. And his tongue was in his mouth, moving about like a dueling sword. And Hiranyakashipu, when he saw that Krishna came out of the pillar in this form that was designed to kill him, he thought, I'm going to win. And he leapt at Nrsimha, who caught him like a cat catches a mouse, and looked at him a little bit and then let him go. And Hiranyakashipu was so stupid, he thought, just see, he's scared of me. He let me go. He's afraid of me. So then he regrouped, and he got a sword and shield instead of a club, and he flew back in like a moth into a flame. And Nrsimha was so brilliant, like a sun, that Hiranyakashipu disappeared. And he was jumping up in the air and down and all around, like doing a whole capoeira acrobatic thing. And the demigods were scared. They had no faith. Prahlad was not scared. The demigods were scared. They thought maybe Hiranyakashipu will win. Maybe Nrsimha will win. They weren't actually Vaishnavas. They were sort of half. And eventually Nrsimha took Hiranyakashipu, put him on his lap, ripped his body apart, and put his garland on his head. Nrsimhadeva Bhagavan ki. Then all of the pious people showed up. Brahma, Shiva, the Chanras, the Kinnaras, the Kimpurushas, the Vidyadharas, the Gandharvas, the Pitris, everybody, every celestial personality, the Yakshas, everybody showed up. And they all offered prayers, and Nrsimha was not pacified. And then they pushed Prahlad forward, who offered his obeisances, and Nrsimha immediately felt calm, and put his hand on Prahlad's head, who began crying with ecstatic symptoms, and Prahlad got up and offered beautiful prayers. Humble prayers. I was so foolish, I was wasting my time. You sent your dear devotee for me. You gave me good instruction. My only duty is to serve you. You're my master, I'm your servant, I don't want anything. Nrsimha tried to give him a benediction. He said, I don't want any benedictions. Brahma said, what do you want? And Hiranyakashipu said, oh, yadi dasyasi me kamam varmtam vardotama. He said, if you want to give me a benediction, let me not die in the day or night, not this, not that, not the other thing. And then Nrsimha asked Prahlad, take a benediction. And Prahlad said, yadi dasyasi me kamam varmtam vardarshava kamani vrijasam roham bhavatas tuvarnevaram. If you want to give me a benediction, give me the benediction. I never ask you for anything. I'm your servant. You're my master. Don't cheapen our relationship by thinking I ever want anything from you. If you want to give me anything, have some mercy on my father. Forgive my father for his offenses. And so Prahlad, who's really the hero of the story, taught us that when you have Krishna, you actually don't need anything else. You're satisfied. If you want to know if you're a devotee, then you can ask yourself, am I satisfied chanting my japa? Am I satisfied worshiping the deity? Am I satisfied doing service? Am I satisfied reading our Shastra? Am I satisfied helping other living entities come closer to Krishna? Does that give me satisfaction? Or am I always looking for the next thing, the big thing I want to do? To the extent you want to do something else, to that extent you haven't understood. Prahlad could have had anything. This happens over and over again. Some great Vaishnava will be offered a benediction, like the Tapasvis are begging for, and they'll say, no, I don't want it. It's okay. I have you. What else do I need? I'm satisfied. I'm peaceful. So that's the story. Prahlad Charita. We don't call it Nrsimha Lila. You can call it that. But if you really want to know, it's called Prahlad Charita. This story is called Prahlad Charita. Dhruv Charita, Prahlad Charita. The character of Prahlad. It's a story about a great devotee and his life, and how Krishna miraculously appeared in the life of a devotee and helped him through his darkest days and was there for him in his time of need. Was actually always there for him. So it's really a story of a devotee. Nrsimha, of course, is the Lord, so it's his holy day. But if you look at how this story is traditionally referred to in Sanskrit, in ancient texts, it's referred to as Prahlad Charita. The story of Prahlad's activities, of Prahlad's character. All right. Thank you for faithfully listening. When you hear a story like this, it's very auspicious. On the day, at the time, you hear the full story. It's a good thing. It brings a lot of auspiciousness into your life, makes miracles happen. This is what we've been doing for thousands of years. So before we wrap it up, let's come up with a dozen things we learned from the story. Go. Raise your hands, non-rhetorical. What do you learn from the story? Yes, live.
To start the explanation of Krishna with consciousness?
Yeah. Prahlad started with consciousness, investigating this world. How else are we going to start looking for God? We've got to look at what's in front of us. And if you look at what's in front of you in the right way, in a careful way, you find there are things in this world that are not of this world. Pretty cool, right? All right, that's one. We got 11 more. Let's go, guys. Yes?
The importance of knowing our position in this world?
That's not enough. I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay. The importance of knowing that whether we're in control of everything or whether we're servants and how it can influence really like our trajectory in this life.
All right, you're saying that we have to learn the importance of understanding that we don't own things in this world, and that the world existed before we did, and we need to change our vantage point, stop thinking of ourselves as being independent owners and functional competitors. Right?
Yeah.
Excellent. Good. Let's go. Yes.
I really like Prahlad.
Yell at me and take your mask off.
I really like the point you made about Prahlad.
Yell at me and take your mask off.
I really like the point you made about Prahlad as complete dependence. Whatever the situation, he or Krishna, irrespective of anything. So,
Prahlad is distinguished from the demigods because he never had any doubt in Nrsimha. He never had any doubt in Krishna. When his father asked him, "Where's your Lord?" he's like, "He's everywhere." He had no doubt. And that shows you something about what it means to be an Uttam Vaishnava, a topmost Vaishnava. It's precisely your ability to see Krishna in all things. Right? Excellent point. Yes, Kim.
Vengeful anger takes you down a bad path.
C.S. Lewis said, I believe that the door to hell is locked from the inside. If we have free will, it means we really need to take responsibility for our negative qualities and our negative mentality. And you see with Hiranyakashipu, a whole lifetime wasted because he got traumatized and wasn't able to wrap his head around it. He suffered a traumatic event when he was young, and he just wasn't able to get over it. You understand? Excellent. Yes, sir. And then you. Yes.
Despite our educators' wishes, sometimes the things we learn aren't to their liking.
Yeah, going to school doesn't mean that those teachers are necessarily teaching you the absolute best information. And there might be some things you need to learn in the school of hard knocks, through life, and those things may actually be more valuable. Just because it says so in the newspaper doesn't make it true. Just because it's spouted by mass media or conspiracy theorists doesn't make it true. We have to learn to look for truth and not just become victims of mainstream media or conspiracy theories. We have to learn to think critically and think for ourselves. Excellent point. Arti.
Even the most evil of beings are the greatest of devotees.
Prahlad was born in a Daitya family, and he was a great devotee. Hiranyakashipu, by all accounts, was a very high-class kshatriya, and he was not so pious and not so good. And we have to learn to look at the character of somebody instead of their official position in society. Excellent. Yes?
Everything in this world doesn't belong to us, and we shouldn't be looking at it that way and trying to compete with Krishna.
What Sri said, that we have to radically reframe the way we look at the world and look at ourselves as stewards and borrowers who are taking care of something. And if we do that, we live in a different world. We actually live in a different world. You live in a, really, and briefly, narcissism is really entitlement, is really a lack of gratitude. You think you deserve everything and everything revolves around you, instead of feeling grateful for the things you've been given that go beyond what you deserve. And so cultivating gratitude and getting rid of entitlement is the birthplace of all good qualities. And this reframe allows you to sort of immediately step into a new world. Right? Excellent. More. Yes.
Austerity for the wrong reasons isn't going to get in your way.
Austerity for the wrong reasons is still bad. Piety for the wrong reasons is still bad. You got to look in your own heart at what your motivation is. We got to go beyond behavior into what the motivation behind that behavior is. You got to look at both. Excellent. Yes, sir.
We need to love a God so that we become desireless as Prahlad became.
Yeah, it's not trying to become desireless in some sort of Buddhist way. Rather, you love Krishna so much, your heart is so filled, your heart is so full, that when it comes time to let go of things in this world, you can do so very boldly like a hero. Dhruv Maharaj, he stepped on Yamaraj to get into the Pushpa Vimana and go back to Vaikuntha. He had no fear. He was able to let go. Tukaram was able to let go of this material world and go back to Vaikuntha. We have to deeply embrace loving Krishna, and that love will reign supreme and win the day. Excellent point. Sadhu, sadhu. You made up for the interruption earlier. Very good. And each one of these points has been brilliant. No one has said anything that wasn't brilliant. We got 3 slots left. Who else? Yes.
The core of the story, the unflinching faith and determination that Prahlad had. We can say that, I have full faith in Krishna. And then the story of Prahlad, is here. And
it's humbling. It's humbling. Prahlad's faith is humbling. It makes us realize how small we really are. And if you want to have faith, you're going to get a great chance to prove it in this lifetime. And we're all going to go through our difficulties. And Prahlad makes a point. He says, if you want to see Adhoksaja means the being who is beyond what you can see with your senses. There is a sense in which you have to be deeply philosophical and deeply spiritual and go beyond this world. Because Krishna is not just in front of you in a cheap way like this. You have to have a deeper vision. You have to be able to see the world through a deeper lens. And that requires, there has to be some time where you practice that and cultivate it. And you'll have to go through some difficulties to really get there. We should feed you guys before you leave. Ask them to bring prasad out. Go. They're going to bring you plates right now. They should have brought them out earlier. I don't know why they didn't. That's 10. We got 2 more slots. People who haven't spoken yet. Yes. Yes.
Sometimes adversity and being on a lower plane of existence makes meditative release and,
Suffering can be therapeutic. We don't want to admit it, but it's actually true. Pressure makes diamonds. Otherwise, it's just coal. If you want your love for Krishna to be unalloyed, if you want to be unflinching, then things have to happen in life which would make you flinch so you can learn how not to flinch. It's the way it works. That's 11. And Amrita for 12. Loud.
I learned that I have more in common with Hiranyakashipu than I have ever wanted to know or realized.
We all do. We have things in common with Hiranyakashipu, and the story is instructive. It teaches us what to work on and what to cultivate. Both Prahlad and Hiranyakashipu are our teachers. And they accentuate the things we want to cultivate, and they accentuate the things we want to extirpate. And both things are incredibly valuable. Yeah. Excellent. Good job, guys. Thank you very much. Nrsimha Bhagavan ki